The Last Horror Movie is a really interesting film. There is one aspect that I don't love. I think it maybe made it feel a little bit less believable, but for the most part I found this to be really satisfying and honestly more disturbing than most horror films that I've seen because it felt real. This was released in 2003. It's directed by Julian Richards. It's written by Richards and James Handel, with a cast including Kevin Howarth as Max, Mark Stevenson as the assistant, and various others. And I'll come to the assistant in a moment. Max Parry is a wedding videographer, and he's also a serial killer. And I have to say that the actual approach for this is pretty interesting because the film starts as if we're watching a typical slasher horror film, and then it cuts to a recording that Max has done over this videotape, and he's talking about how somebody has rented this video. So we're watching it as if we've rented this video from the video store and he has recorded over it, and now he is speaking to us directly. Max the serial killer is speaking to us directly, and the rest of the film is his vlog, if you like, going around killing people. Some of the killings are unexpected, as he's just walking along and then he does something. Some of them we can see where he's building up to it, and it's so matter of fact, these killings. They're just there. There is not a lot of suspense. There's not a lot of typical horror elements, jump scares, things like that. It's just so matter of fact that it is eerie. And as I said, there was one aspect that I think did kind of make it not very believable. And that's the fact that Max has an assistant, somebody to follow him around with a camera and record his story because he wants to tell his story as a serial killer. And I think it ruins it, because who would do that? Now, I'm not saying nobody would do that, but I just find it hard to believe that somebody would follow him around and just videotape him doing all of these killings. There are times, however, when the assistant isn't there and it's just Max and the camera and a victim, and he's obviously set the camera up accordingly on a tripod or whatever, and those scenes are so believable. And I just wish they hadn't included the assistant. It still would have worked as well. Yes, we wouldn't have seen as much of Max. For example, we do see him outside walking around, and obviously if there wasn't anybody there to record those scenes wouldn't have played out that way. But Max still could have recorded those scenes. He still could have taken the camera along himself, or they could have just not included those scenes and it would have been much more believable. I just found that aspect of it, somebody recording it for Max and watching him doing some of these killings, I just didn't buy into. I didn't believe it at all. But the scenes where it's just Max and the camera and typically a victim, so real, so powerful, so disturbing. Max as a character as well is quite cool, calm and collected. It's the kind of person you'd look at and think, I had no idea he was a killer. And that, again, makes it really easy because he just seems like a typical average person. And there are scenes, and again, this is where I think maybe they included the assistant, but again, Max could have easily found a way to film these elements himself, where we do get to see him just living a normal life, doing things that don't involve murder. And they help to show that part of his life is just a typical average life. Again, I think that's maybe why they included the element of the assistant, so we had a reason to record those or to have somebody to record those. But again, Max could have set up the camera by himself. It wouldn't have really been a big issue to solve. We do have some really dark moments, and again, a lot of those dark moments are dark not because they're suspenseful and dramatic, because they're just so blunt and matter of fact, and I find that to be really, really eerie. Max is a very well written, complex character. I think the performance there is brilliant. Max is played by Kevin Howarth, and I do think he did an absolutely fantastic, eerie job, and definitely very disturbing. And I do think that they took the right approach as well with not making it this dramatic, suspenseful, jump scary horror film. It's just all matter of fact. This is Max, this is what he does, and he's just going to record it. And that makes it all more disturbing and believable as well, a lot more believable. So I do recommend it. The issue with the assistant is not a big issue. I still was buying into what I was watching enough, but I do think that that was not the best decision. Again, I can understand why they maybe included the assistant so we could see Max walking around in different scenarios and things, but the film would have worked just as well without that element. So, all things considered, The Last Horror Movie is a disturbing experience. It feels very believable, and I'm very happy to recommend it.